Be'lakor with Vessels. Now, this is kind of a really cool year for heavy metal because we're seeing a number of bands come back. We're seeing a number of big albums, but we have to remember that heavy metal has a big underground following. And Be'lakor is a name that sounds like it's been around forever. It really does. It sounds like this has been a group that we've talked about ever since the inception of the channel, because it has, because they formed a couple years beforehand. This is their 4th release. And it's amazing to feel that these guys are only 4 albums old, because they have matured a lot and their sound has continued to get a little bit more crisp. This sort of melodic death metal that's being done at a more epic scale, a more epic grade. You know, think about what Opeth did for progressive death metal, for combining those two things and taking it sort of to that epic level. Now think about melodic death metal, which you typically get with that. Think about a little bit of more crisp riffing and a little bit more elongated, more atmospheric sounding tracks, one that have a little bit more room to breathe, and bam, you have not only what Be'lakor seeks out to accomplish, but also what Vessels is able to accomplish right out of the gate. You know, even with just the very first track, the opening track, Luma, which is only about 2 minutes in length, that kicks in immediately to an Ember's Arc. It's something that sets up that influence, it sets up that atmosphere. It kind of gives you a little bit of a slice of what you're about to expect. So as opposed to other introductory tracks, which will sometimes just sort of smooth in a little bit of layering in order to sort of sashay into track number 2, this is one that's actually introducing some more of the core values. And Ember's Arc is able to give you those core values. It's 8.5 minutes, and it delivers. And I like the fact that the atmosphere on these songs, and we can also throw in Withering Strands, which is the next track, which is 11 minutes in length. I like how that atmosphere builds around the music, the way in which that center point never feels like it is deviated upon all of that much, but there's just enough of that real variance that occurs in order to really satisfy. It keeps you interested, it keeps you engaged, because nothing that you hear feels poor. Instead, their directness, their assault on this, you know, the way in which the vocals are able to cascade over this wall of mellow that gives you the overall experience. It's one that does not take its finger off of the pulse of what this genre is all about. And the songwriting is tight and crisp. It's not something that necessarily needs to overarch itself and fly into 17 different, landscapes in order to really deliver something that has solid footing underneath of it. It's instead something that's able to use some of the simplest and most bare bones resources available to them in order to craft something very eloquent. Using a couple of those layers and making that, very nice tower of solid songwriting. These 2 tracks are great and masterful, real explanations of that. The first 20 minutes of this record are absolutely tremendous. But then whenever you get to Roots to Sever and into Whelm, leading into the next shortened track, which is A Thread Dissolves, which is 3 minutes in length, the continuation of this is really where the keynote factor is. Some will listen to an album such as this and find it to be picture perfect because it maintains itself very well. The overall flow and the way in which the river of the music progresses down perhaps the forest is just one that does not stand against very many rocks. There's not a lot of cascading waterfalls. There's not very many obstacles in the way. It's instead very free-flowing, very free-forming, but sticks within its comfortable confines. It's not one that's trying to flood itself and register itself elsewhere in order to try to maybe draw people in. It's a very pure product. It's a very pure style of music, or at least for this release. They don't try to go and dive into things that are too fancy. Instead, Be'lakor offers to remain within themselves and capture their identity and maintain their identity exceptionally well throughout this disc. The Smoke of Many Fires, the very final track on this album, this 8th track, is one that's able to, once again, use the atmosphere and pacing to their advantage. Overall, you're getting a combined effort here of, thrusting riffs, thunderous power that is coupled around some fantastic bass work. The percussion is very solid on this in order to illuminate over the fantastic vocals that are delivered, that gruffness, that very solid and sincere delivery that definitely gives you some goosebumps in moments. But the Smoke of Many Fires is one that's not going to necessarily be the all-encompassing strange finale that you sometimes hear on other discs, perhaps going and harboring back to the latest Gojira disc, Magma. But instead, the Smoke of Many Fires aims to stay within the identity of the band and just deliver something that's above and beyond what you've heard thus far. And while I find Withering Strands to be the true highlight of this album, I feel that the Smoke of Many Fires has enough of a self-identity and enough of a real strong passion, and a strong, real representation of itself and what Be'lakor is as a whole, that it does its best to really be a silver medal. Some of the earlier works of this band have a little bit more of a movement to it. There is a little bit more of that temptation to drift. There's a little more raw emotion. This one at times can feel a slightly neutered, just slightly neutered, but it's not something that happens very often. Whenever you encounter a release like this, where a band stays comfortably within themselves, there is kind of a desire to maybe hear what they're able to do if they were to blend in a little bit more of, say in this case, maybe a little bit more of a folk element, or tread a little bit further and deeper into territory that could be registered as potentially black metal instead of death metal. There's not a very large gap there. It's not something that's very difficult to really jump into by mistake. But a band that's this comfortable with where they are and who they are, and a band that's still writing music that's this solid, that has this solid of a foundation, that still comes off as extremely enjoyable and also addicting. This is a hard album to put down, and that's a solid thing to say, mainly because it's natural. This is a disc you throw on and you don't stop it. You don't stop it because you have other things to do. You don't stop it because you find other things to do. The only reason why you stop it is because maybe your phone rings or an emergency occurs. It's a very comfortable listen, which for some people that will not be very comforting because they would want something that has a little bit more maybe to offer. But overall, I think this album does its best to really satisfy while also attempt to captivate. This is an 84 out of 100 album. Very strong, magical release, however one that I think they could do a little bit more with. I still feel that there's a lot of toying around, a lot of experimentation that Be'lakor could really, sink their teeth into and really deliver something that is truly impressive, terrifically magical, and maybe one of its kind. But I like the fact that they take the concept of melody and they take the concept of death metal and go pro with it. Instead of just being satisfied and sufficing with little 3 to 4 minute cuts, they go long, they go epic, they build atmosphere. They give it something a little bit more. They give it something that makes it a little bit more unique or a little bit more satisfactory toward those who like black metal or those who enjoy longer treks. I like what this band does. I want to know what you guys think, though. What do you think that Vessels was able to do that was powerful or positive for Be'lakor? Do you feel that there's something that they really need in order to take themselves to the next level? Let me know in the comments below. My name is coverkillernation, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow because we have a release that's pretty important to me. So it's a little personal, but we have to talk about it. That's right. Hey yo, God. See you guys then.